And you're live.
It's 5:05 and welcome into a Tuesday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. I'm Nick Craig. Good morning to you. Breaking news this morning in the ongoing battle for power in the North Carolina Supreme Court. A federal judge late last night around 7 o'clock ordered the North Carolina State Board of Elections certify Democrat Allison Riggs as the winner of the 2024 State Supreme Court election that has been contested now for some 7 months. The decision rejects ballot challenges from Republican candidate Jefferson Griffin. U.S. Chief District Judge Richard Myers placed a 1-week hold on his decision to give time to Griffin's legal team to appeal. They are apparently looking into the ruling as of this morning and determining if there will be next steps from their side on a legal standpoint. Myers rejected a state Supreme Court decision that took place last month that placed at least 1,675 and as many as some 5,700 ballots from last fall's election in question and in dispute. The state's highest court endorsed a ballot cure process to deal with some of those disputed ballots. Most of the ballots in question were tied to overseas voters who had provided no photo identification, even though state law requires it. A smaller number of them involved in what are being described as never residents who had checked a box on a voter form indicating that they had never lived in North Carolina or the United States. Myers' decision currently would preserve Riggs's 734 vote lead over Griffin out of more than 5.5 million ballots cast in the contest. And while this decision is on hold for another week, Judge Myers emphasized that state courts cannot change election rules after voting ends or misclassify eligible voters without recourse. Riggs, the appointed incumbent, will remain on the Supreme Court if this goes forward. Griffin, who had challenged those ballots, will continue on the appeals court again if this decision is to stand. This was a lengthy hearing, a lengthy process that we have continued to watch unfold over the last few months, and we'll see. This seems like there might finally be some light at the end of the tunnel as it relates to a final process here. The North Carolina Republican Party and Griffin's legal team are reviewing this matter this morning. We'll see if they take it and decide to appeal this to the United States Supreme Court. That appears to be the next stop for them. We'll continue to track the details right here on the Carolina Journal News Hour, where it's now 5:08, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. There's been an ongoing debate in the state of North Carolina whether sheriffs have to abide by ICE detainers as it relates to illegal immigrants that are grabbed while sheriffs are performing their normal measures and actions as local law enforcement across the state of North Carolina in all 100 counties. We are tracking a new letter this morning from the North Carolina Sheriff's Association that we've got some details on. Brianna Kramer, CarolinaJournal.com, joins us with those details. Brianna, this has been an ongoing debate now for multiple years in the state of North Carolina. What's the latest this morning from the Sheriff's Association?
Yeah, that's right, Nick. The North Carolina Sheriff's Association is pushing back against claims that some sheriffs across the state are continuing to overlook state law by refusing to follow ICE Immigration and Customs Enforcement detainers that are issued. In some counties, we have some sheriffs that interpret the law differently than most of North Carolina's 100 sheriffs. And so this has been an ongoing debate, and the General Assembly has passed legislation, House Bill 10 passed at the end of last year, and we have more legislation going through currently trying to crack down and require all sheriffs to honor these detainers and to work with the federal immigration authorities when it comes to dealing with illegal alien criminals.
The story this morning in large part has surrounded itself with the Mecklenburg County Sheriff and Gary McFadden. There's been a lot of criticism hurled at him over the last couple of years as it relates to when somebody is arrested by local law enforcement, one of these 100 county sheriffs. They provide that information to the federal government, and if ICE gets a detainer, many sheriffs, most of them, 95% of them across the state, Brianna, hold that individual until Immigration and Customs Enforcement can get there. The Mecklenburg County Sheriff over the last couple of years has not, and that's caused some big issues.
Yeah, that's right. I had the chance to speak with Sheriff McFadden last year, and he explained in his own words that he legally can't consider Charlotte or the Mecklenburg area sanctuary jurisdiction under state law. But he still does not think that these detainers are authorized and legal in some of the legal matters pertaining to this. And General Statute 162.62 is really what it comes down to. This is the key law that the General Assembly is focused on changing the language of right now to get rid of any loopholes or maybe concerns like McFadden has. This law states that nothing should prevent a person from being released from jail, from custody, if they meet all the conditions of their bond. So what McFadden says is that when they meet all their conditions, they are supposed to be released. Now, ICE says you should hold them, and McFadden says, I can't because a judge ordered me to release them. So that's really what the issue comes down to. It's just a few sheriffs across North Carolina that kind of argue this different positioning on this matter. But this past week, the North Carolina Sheriff's Association did say that these ICE requests are voluntary, not mandatory. So they weren't necessarily taking a side and saying no matter what a sheriff does, when it comes to cooperating with ICE and giving them a notice of when somebody is scheduled to be released from jail, that is up to the local county and the sheriff to determine.
Brianna, it sounds like maybe the goalposts are moving a little bit on this. Our listeners are familiar with House Bill 10, which passed last year, which we heard from individuals like Gary McFadden that if the General Assembly changed the law, he would in fact comply. House Bill 10 did in fact go into law, and it's been in law now for months, and it seems like there's maybe not enough teeth in that, and now the General Assembly is back essentially drafting something again to make the rules even stricter as it relates to holding these individuals that there are ongoing ICE detainers for?
Yes, that's right. And so this is called the Criminal Illegal Alien Enforcement Act. It actually passed the North Carolina House last week, House Bill 318. So it's just doubling down on House Bill 10 that passed last year, and just requiring cooperation with ICE, but even more than that, adjusting some of the legal matters and requiring notification. So really sheriffs notifying ICE, the time frame, 48 hours. So just kind of doubling down is what they called it with this new bill. And so the North Carolina Sheriff's Association worked on drafting this language alongside members of the North Carolina House so that they could really get the language right this time around. And, they say that if this passes, it obviously now goes to the Senate, but if this passes, the Sheriff's Association is confident that if it becomes law, all sheriffs will fully comply with however this general statute is amended and changed. And they said that we have all taken an oath to do so, and we will.
Obviously, there continues to be a lot of movement going on here. We did get some comments in from House Speaker Destin Hall as it relates to this legislation as well. What does he have to say?
Yeah, so last week he was on the House floor explaining what this bill is, why they need to get this adjusted in a new piece of legislation this year. He said, unfortunately, somewhere around 5 or so sheriffs in our state, if not outright violating the law, were certainly violating the spirit that was behind the law. And in that law, when an ICE detainer gets lodged, the sheriff has somebody in their jail who's been charged with a serious crime. They have to cooperate with ICE. So this bill fixes any perceived loopholes that may exist in the current law. So that's really what this bill is coming down to, perceived loopholes.
And obviously, it's something we'll keep a very close eye on. A great update this morning. Brianna Kramer from CarolinaJournal.com joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:15, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Let's get a look at traffic this morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick. Good.
It's 521. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. Don't forget, if you miss any portion of our show live here weekday mornings 5 to 6 on WBT, check out the Carolina Journal News Hour podcast. It's available in Google Play, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, anywhere you get your shows. Just search for the Carolina Journal News Hour, tap the subscribe or follow button, and take a new program with you each and every weekday morning. It's the Carolina Journal News Hour podcast. Download and subscribe now. In the wake of rising tariffs, China has predictably cut back on U.S. exports, including pork and soybeans, both major North Carolina agriculture industry commodities. According to Steve Troxler, the commissioner of the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services, he says, quote, "The export market is significant for North Carolina farmers and agribusiness, as nearly 96% of the global population is outside of the United States. We are focused on opening markets around the world from North Carolina's ag commodities and foods, as well as continuing to build on trade relationships we have established internationally." Weekly reports from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, show a significant drop in both soybean and pork exports to China. According to a report from the Wall Street Journal, U.S. pork sales dropped by more than 12,000 tons for the week of April the 17th to only 5,800 tons for the week of April the 24th. That is a 72% reduction in just 1 week. It's also the lowest number reported thus far in the year 2025. Kelly Lester, a policy analyst for the Center for Food, Power, and Life at the John Locke Foundation, told the Carolina Journal, quote, "This is an unfortunate day for North Carolina farmers, but it was easy to predict. China has been the largest buyer of U.S. soybeans, which are essential for livestock feed. It was also a rapidly expanding market for American pork, especially as it was struggling with domestic shortages due to African swine fever. China canceled a 12,300-ton shipment, according to Pork Business, the largest cancellation since May of 2020. That was, of course, right in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic. According to Chinese customs data in 2024, China imported some $4.6 billion worth of pork, with the majority coming from countries other than the United States. According to reports, U.S. pork exports to China amounted to $859 million in the year 2024. Steve Troxler, the agriculture commissioner, said, quote, "For North Carolina pork, our top buyers in 2024 were Korea, Japan, Australia, and China, with combined purchases of nearly $318 million. Korea purchased $187 million, Japan $69.4, Australia $32.9, and China $28.6 million worth of pork in 2024. Soybeans also dropped significantly from 72,000 tons in the week of April 10th to just 1,800 in the week of April the 24th, according to that Wall Street Journal report. Earlier this month, President Donald Trump raised the tariffs on Chinese goods up to 84%, then later escalating those to 145%. This did spark retaliation from China, who was unwilling to come to the negotiating table and discuss those tariffs, who increased their tariffs on United States exports to 125%. The agriculture commissioner continued by saying, in terms of North Carolina soybean, growing markets include Taiwan, Vietnam, Malaysia, Mexico, and Thailand, with Taiwan being our leader buyer for 2024 with over $19.4 million being purchased, and China being the second at $16.9 million. While China being the number one buyer of U.S. soybeans, this reduction will dramatically impact the agriculture industry in North Carolina, as soybeans are in the top 5 cash crops across the state. China accounts for some 48% of U.S. soybean exports, and in 2022, North Carolina exported nearly $500 million in soybeans, according to the Office of U.S. Trade Representatives. According to a report by the New York Times, last year that amounted to more than 27 million metric tons, worth over $12.8 billion. According to the details from that New York Times report, they noted, quote, American soybean farmers are worried about whether their biggest customers will keep buying. According to USDA, approximately 1.61 million acres of soybeans were harvested in North Carolina last year. That's down about 10,000 acres from where that number was in 2023. Kelly Lester with the John Locke Foundation noted in 2018 alone, due to Trump's trade war, U.S. soybean exports to China plummeted by over half, and pork producers faced steep tariffs that made many of their products uncompetitive. This was rough on North Carolina farmers who depended on those markets to survive. Despite efforts to maintain a good trade relationship with China, North Carolina farmers are currently feeling the impacts of the ongoing tariffs and trade war, which will soon trickle down to impacting the consumers of those products. Steve Troxler noted in his conversation with Carolina Journal, "We have worked hard to develop strong business relationships in China and other countries and want to see them continue. Unfortunately, when there's a disagreement over tariffs, other countries hit us through agriculture. From the last time we experienced trade disruptions because of tariffs, the Trump administration was very good at looking after farmers' interests, and we certainly hope that will happen this time." Ending quote there from Steve Troxler, who is the commissioner of the North Carolina Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. We've got a lot of very interesting stats and figures this morning on both pork and soybeans. They are a major part of North Carolina's economy, and as we've talked about frequently over the last couple of months, agriculture in itself does continue to be North Carolina's largest product, and it is a major economic driver for the state. You can read some additional details this morning. Katie Zender's got the story. The headline, China cuts back on major NC exports. That is available this morning over on our website, carolinajournal.com, where it's now 5:28, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Time to get another look at traffic on your Tuesday morning commute. A look at the roadways with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thanks. And you're live.
It's 5:36, so welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Recapping our big breaking news this morning, a federal judge has ordered the North Carolina State Board of Elections to certify Democrat Allison Riggs as the winner of the 2024 state Supreme Court race, rejecting Republican Jefferson Griffin's ballot challenges. U.S. Chief District Judge Richard Myers ruled that retroactively invalidating ballots, particularly from overseas and military voters, violated constitutional rights, including due process and equal protection. Myers, in an order last night, blocked a state court order that would have potentially disqualified thousands of ballots and reaffirmed Riggs's 734 vote lead out of more than 5.5 million ballots cast. While the decision is on hold for a week to allow for the possibility of an appeal, Judge Myers emphasized that states cannot change election rules after voting ends and misclassify eligible voters with no recourse. Riggs, who is an appointed incumbent, remains on the Supreme Court if this is to go forward, and Griffin, who has challenged those ballots, will continue to serve on the Court of Appeals until 2028. This happened late last night. We have not heard anything definitively from Griffin or the North Carolina Republican Party as to whether they do look to appeal this case. We'll be watching those details throughout the day and pass them along to you as soon as we get them, not only here on the Carolina Journal News Hour, but of course staying up to date on our website, carolinajournal.com, where it's now 5:37, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. We are continuing our coverage this morning with the small town of Carrboro and their ongoing lawsuit against the energy behemoth Duke Energy across the state of North Carolina. Carrboro, a small town just outside of Chapel Hill, is suing the state's largest electrical producer and provider. To get some additional details on that this morning, Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Mitch, Carrboro is a very small town. Duke Energy is a massive energy company. What's the latest that we're tracking this morning over at carolinajournal.com?
Yeah, Carrboro is not the largest of the municipalities, but it's probably one that is of least surprise of one that would be likely to sue Duke Energy. This is a suit that's actually been in the works for a little while, but the latest court action is that back in March, Duke Energy filed a motion to dismiss the lawsuit, saying that basically Carrboro was trying to get Duke to change its policies on emissions and make major changes, and that the argument from Duke is that one customer, one town can't tell Duke Energy what to do about its emissions, and that Duke couldn't affect climate change if it wanted to. Carrboro responded with a response designed to battle that motion to dismiss the suit. And Carrboro is basically saying, no, we're not trying to tell Duke to change its ways or to change its impact on the climate. We're just telling them to pay us for the impact that their policies are having on our government and things that the people in Carrboro have to pay for. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that while the town of Carrboro is the official plaintiff, and for those who aren't familiar with Carrboro, it's a very left of center community. If you think of Chapel Hill as a liberal college town, Carrboro is its even more liberal neighbor just to the west. In fact, the towns touch each other, and most of the people in Chapel Hill and Carrboro interact quite frequently because they're basically right next door to each other. But even though the town of Carrboro is the plaintiff in this case, it's actually being driven by environmental interest groups that don't like Duke Energy and that specifically don't like nuclear power. A group called NC Warn put together this lawsuit and is funding it. So the taxpayers in Carrboro are not paying for this litigation. It's actually an outside group that has enlisted Carrboro to be the plaintiff because that's a good way to get headlines. A town sues Duke Energy over its climate policies. And so the latest that will happen is now that Carrboro has responded, North Carolina Business Court judge overseeing the case will have to decide whether this lawsuit can move forward or whether Duke's arguments will prevail that Carrboro is not stating a claim that it can get relief for, that it's basically trying to get Duke Energy to change its climate policies, and that that's not something that a town is able to do through the legal system.
Well, and Mitch, let's extrapolate this out. Duke Energy operates in half a dozen states here, including North Carolina. If something like this were to go forward, you could potentially see hundreds, if not thousands, of these similar lawsuits in areas where not only Duke, but the dozens of other major energy providers across the United States operate the electrical grid and operate so many electrical generation systems, whether that's nuclear, coal, steam, through natural gas, whatever. This could set a crazy precedent going forward.
That's exactly right. And I think that's one of the reasons why Duke Energy responded the way it did, because Carrboro is asking for damages for perceived impacts that Duke Energy's policies have had on the town. And while that's true, if Carrboro were to succeed and collect damages, that would open the door for any other community that thought that it could collect off of Duke to try to do so. And eventually, you would see some sort of situation that would be unsustainable and untenable, because while some municipalities would decide not to get into this game, others would. And after enough of them were able to get money out of Duke, then Duke wouldn't have any money to be able to put forward to pay any more of the debts. So this is the type of thing that is being done to help try to change the way that Duke Energy and in other parts of the country, other major power providers, change the way they go about dealing with climate change. The argument from Carrboro is that Duke Energy has been misleading about its impacts on the climate, and that it is the misleading practices that should allow the town to collect money. Duke Energy is saying, no, this is not true. And even if it were true, this is not the type of thing that Carrboro is able to collect money from. The interesting thing about this case is that it was originally filed in Orange County Superior Court. Carrboro, along with Chapel Hill, are in Orange County, and you might think that an Orange County judge might be a little bit more amenable to these arguments, but the case was moved from Orange County Superior Court to the North Carolina Business Court, where positions are taken to look at, okay, what's best for the consumer, what's best for the businesses that are operating in North Carolina, and let's ensure that we have decisions that are going to be common across North Carolina when it comes to lawsuits involving business. So one would suspect that the North Carolina Business Court will take a very critical eye at this suit and will not only look at what Carrboro specifically is asking for, but just how a case like this would affect the rest of the state if Carrboro were to win.
Mitch, really quickly, and I don't mean to ask this as a leading question, but wasn't this the opportunity for the legislature in a state like North Carolina to step in if there were issues with Duke Energy and emissions? I know that there's been a lot of discussion about the Carolina Carbon Plan 2030 and 2050 deadlines coming up. Isn't that the more practical avenue if you did have some of these serious concerns about emissions and climate change, to handle it through the legislative arm of government, not the business court side?
Yes, and the General Assembly has been taking steps to deal with it. We've had various pieces of legislation that are designed to cut down Duke Energy's carbon emissions moving forward. I think that from the aspect of the Carrboro officials who decided to join this suit and NC Warren, the outside group that is pushing this suit, they're saying the General Assembly isn't doing enough. You've seen that on another front. They're asking new Governor Josh Stein to come in and take a stance against Duke Energy and its plans. So this is part of a concerted effort to change the way utilities go about dealing with the perceived threat of climate change. And it will be very interesting to see what the North Carolina Business Court does with this suit. If it's allowed to go forward, do any other municipalities get on board? And if so, what does that mean for Duke Energy's bottom line and for its ability to provide electricity to us as consumers?
Something we'll obviously keep a very close eye on. A great update this morning. Mitch Kokai from the John Locke Foundation joins us on the Carolina Journal News Hour. Where it's now 5:45, News Talk 1110, 99.3 WBT. Time for another look at traffic on your Tuesday morning with Boomer Von Cannon.
Hey, thank you, Nick. And you're live.
Good morning again. It's 5:52. Welcome back to the Carolina Journal News Hour. News Talk 1110 99.3 WBT. The North Carolina Sheriff's Association is pushing back against assertions that some sheriffs across the state are continuing to overlook state law, refusing to follow laws that require cooperation with immigration and custom enforcement in the removal of illegal aliens. In a recent press release, the Sheriff's Association said that it is their understanding and firm belief that all North Carolina sheriffs are fully cooperating with legal requirements in General Statute 162-62, and that they had seen no information to indicate anything to the contrary. Republicans in the North Carolina General Assembly have continued to claim that there are about 5 North Carolina sheriffs out of 100 that continue to refuse to cooperate with ICE. However, the Sheriff's Association clarifying that ICE requests are voluntary under the law and not currently enforceable by general statute, meaning that all sheriffs, no matter their procedural differences, are complying. The press release reads in part, quote, "We acknowledge that Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, would prefer that sheriffs honor the requests of ICE to voluntarily take additional actions beyond those required by state or federal law," end quote there from the press release. Voluntary ICE requests include honoring immigration detainers for 48 hours beyond the time that a prisoner would otherwise be released from jail, as well as notifying ICE 48 hours before the prisoner is slated to be released. It was noted in the press release that some sheriffs comply with these voluntary requests from ICE and others do not. The Sheriff's Association said in either case, the sheriffs are fully complying with both state and federal laws, since the request from ICE is in fact voluntary and not required by federal, state law, or court order. This has prompted some movement in the North Carolina General Assembly. Last week, the North Carolina House passed the Criminal Illegal Alien Enforcement Act to double down on requiring North Carolina's law enforcement to cooperate with ICE to remove criminal illegal migrants who have been charged with serious crime from various communities across the state. The Sheriff's Association did supposedly work very closely with the bill sponsors on the drafted legislation to ensure that the amendments to state law don't cause any operational difficulty for sheriffs or the operation of county jails. House Speaker Destin Hall said last week during debate on this legislation, "We did pass a bill requiring sheriffs to cooperate with ICE in the last session. But unfortunately, somewhere around 5 or so sheriffs in our state, if not outright violating the law, were certainly violating the spirit that was behind the law that said when an ICE detainer gets lodged, that the sheriff has somebody in jail who's been charged with a serious crime, that they have to cooperate with ICE. So this bill fixes any perceived loopholes that may exist in current law." The House Speaker has pointed to past situations in Mecklenburg County where Sheriff Gary McFadden has been known to not cooperate with ICE requests. In a press release, the Sheriff's Association urged lawmakers to refrain from appointing to specific sheriffs. I don't think they're going to have much luck with that. It noted, "While we sincerely value our partnership with all of our elected officials, we encourage them and all others to refrain from making accusatory statements about any sheriff without first talking with that sheriff or until becoming fully informed about the actual facts and information available from said sheriff or sheriff's department. Just as we believe that all North Carolina sheriffs are fully complying with the current legal requirements in General Statute 162-62, we are confident that if House Bill 318 is enacted into law, all North Carolina sheriffs will fully comply with the general statute as amended by House Bill 318. We have all taken an oath to do so, and we will." Ending the comments there from the North Carolina Sheriff's Association. Seemingly goalposts continuing to be moved as it relates to cooperating with immigration in customs enforcement, ICE, and those federal detainers that they do put out when local sheriffs go through the process of normal law activity and do arrest an individual who has been charged with some sort of violent crime and is illegally in the United States. We'll continue to keep an eye on it over on our website, carolinajournal.com. That's going to do it for a Tuesday edition of the Carolina Journal News Hour. WBT News is next, followed by Good Morning BT. We're back with you tomorrow morning, 5 to 6, right here on News Talk 1110 and 99.3 WBT.